These are the bumpers from a 1988 Vauxhall Nova. Now, they've seen better days. They've been poorly painted in the past with some black aerosol paint, and now that's all starting to flake off. I'm currently restoring the rest of the car, so it would be a shame to put these back on in the way that they are. So in today's video, I want to get these ready for paint. I want to get them all sanded down and into primer. So, let's get into this. So here are the original bumpers for the Nova. It's fair to say they're in a bad state. They've been poorly painted in the past, obviously with an aerosol matte black or something, because in every little crevice at each bumper, in the front here as well, it is all just cracking and sort of chipping off and stuff. So we're going to have to strip these down as much as possible. I'd actually started rubbing the rear bumper here, as you can see, but I never ever finished it. So today, that's what we're going to be doing, getting these bumpers all ready for paint, getting them into primer, and hopefully they look better by the end of this. Now I'm going to start first with the back bumper because it is the biggest bumper out of the two, so it'll be the most work and the most faff. Now I've got a roll of sandpaper here that I can do stuff by hand with, and then I've got this big bad boy as well to go over the more flat surfaces, just to try and save a bit of time. But aye, it's going to take a while either way, so let's get straight to rubbing. So I started with doing the worst job first, sanding in all the grooves of the bumper by hand, just to get all the little bits of chipped paint out. What a nightmare. The bumper was pretty easy to sand down, there was just so much of that paint flaking off. You would get one bit sanded nicely down, then blow it off and it would all start flaking off again. So I was just trying to get as much of it off as possible. So I'm slowly but surely getting there with this bumper. It's taken absolutely ages. I'm just about finished this top ridge and I've still got 3 more to go up here and then 1 down here. But I'm actually sanding it down with 80 grit sandpaper, which is pretty coarse if you know about sandpaper, which most people do. So yeah, I'm sanding it down with 80 grit just to get as much of the little flaky bits off as possible to make it a bit quicker. So because that's so coarse and this is plastic, it digs in quite a lot. So not only am I having to sand it at once with 80 grit, I'm going to have to go back over it with a more fine gritty sandpaper as well, to smooth it out a bit, which is a total faff, but it is what it is and we need to do it properly, so aye, we'll get there. So yes, that's right, not only was I going to have to sand over it the once with the 80 grit sandpaper, I was going to have to then go back over it with 180 grit. And just to give you a little physical representation of how coarse 80 grit actually is, this is me sanding down this black bit of the bumper. You can see as soon as I've touched it with that 80 grit sandpaper, it has left these harsh marks into that paintwork. But going over that same area with a 180 grit disc, you can just see how much more it fades out that area and leaves less scratch marks. And that's why sanding with the right grade of sandpaper is very important, especially when it comes to painting. If you do it with the wrong grade, you can sometimes see the sand marks right through the paintwork. After spending absolutely ages hand rubbing all those little grooves, I can finally get the sander out with a 180 grit disc on it and sand all the faces off the bumper. And that is the back bumper rubbed for the Nova. Now I've just mounted it up to the car just to be able to show you, but it feels pretty smooth now, and that should be all the bits that were flaking off and that all out of it now. But aye, so that is ready for primer, but now I need to get on with doing the front bumper. Now this still has the front number plate on it, so I need to unscrew that, and it's still got the red trim tape on there. So I've got the heat gun there and I'm going to take it off. So it was first off with that original number plate. Now I do really like the look of this number plate, and I would love to get them remade the exact same as these ones. I love the old style lettering on the plate, and I like that it's got the original dealer on the bottom of the plate as well. I could then remove that red tape that goes right around both the bumpers. Now this stuff looks pretty good, and I will be looking to replace it once I've painted the bumpers too. I don't know where I'm going to find it, but I'm sure it'll be online somewhere. So the front bumper is actually in a lot better condition than the back bumper, surprisingly. We've only really got a bit of flaking paint on this top edge along here, but I have actually just noticed a wee bit of damage here. There's a wee scrape and it's just a wee bit of a dent in there. So I'll get that rubbed down there, and then we can get a wee bit of fill on it. You can see it goes just about down to there, so we'll get this filled as well. First things first, I wanted to get the damage rubbed out of this little dent here. So I got an 80 grit bit of sandpaper, the same stuff that we were using on the back bumper, and you can see where it's starting to highlight where the damage actually is. We really want to sand this bit down well so that it's got enough of a key for the filler to stick to, because we don't want that cracking and falling back out. So after sanding down that bit of damage for a while, I was pretty happy with how it came out, so I could blow it off and then go and get some filler mixed up for this. Now the filler I'm using for this little job is Easy Stop by Kent. Now this stuff isn't as thick of a filler as stuff that you'd put on a massive repair. It allows you to play about with it a bit more because it's a bit thinner. So we can get that sped onto that piece of cardboard and then get some hardener into it. Now you can actually buy filler mixing boards, but cardboard works just as well. The only bad thing is you have to chuck it out after. So the next step is actually to mix a hardener with the filler itself. Now the technique for mixing up filler is actually very important to the job. Now you want to sort of scoop it round on itself and then flatten it back down. This helps get as much air pockets out of the filler as possible, because air pockets in the filler leads to pinholes in the filler once you've rubbed it down, which you don't want. Now that we've mixed the two parts together, the chemical reaction has now started, and we need to get that bit filled on the bumper before the filler dries out. Now this is actually quite a tricky shape to be working with. It's right on the corner of the bumper, and then we've got those little ridges right below it, and we don't want the filler going into those ridges because then it would be a nightmare to get that all sanded back out. So I'm playing about with it a bit, and that's the good thing about this Easy Stop stuff. It is quite, malleable. And while letting that filler dry, I can get on with sanding the rest of the front bumper. Now this is pretty much the same process as the back bumper, but there's a bit less paint chips in this one. And after sanding the rest of the bumper, the filler had dried out, so I can get a piece of 80 grit onto a block and try and keep it as flat as possible on there so we get the filler as smooth as possible. After getting the shape pretty much right with the 80 grit, I can then go back over that area with a 180 grit disc just to try and smooth it off that little bit more so that more primer sticks to it easier. Right, so it's now the next morning and I want to get these bumpers into primer, so they're pretty much ready to go. I just need to give them a blow off and give them a good clean off as well, and then they're pretty much ready. Now for setting these bumpers up for primer, I don't have a bumper stand to put these on, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge. Now my original plan was to just fit them onto the car and just mask all the car around them, but that would be a lot of masking and a waste of materials as well. So the plan is I'm just going to use the bins that we were sanding them on, just cover the bins with some sort of bed sheeting or whatever that we've got in the garage, and then just spray them on the bins. It would be a lot less of a faff with the masking up and stuff, and we won't waste as much materials as well. So I'm going to get them set up on the bins and then give them a clean off, and then we can get to actually priming them. And there we have the setup for priming the bumper. It's as simple as that. I've literally just put a bed sheet onto the bin and then just 2 paint cans behind the bumper just to give it enough height so that the top of the bumper isn't touching the bin. So right, there we go. Pretty simple, but it should work. And then I'll just cover up the side of the car with a big sheet as well. So yeah, there we go. I now need to clean the back bumper off with this water-based degreaser. This is really good stuff for plastic. It means that you didn't get any static as well when you come to priming or painting it. So we'll get this all cleaned off, and then we just need to mix the primer up. So I gave the whole bumper a good wipe down with that water-based panel wipe, and you can see the amount of dirt that has came off of this bumper is mental, and that's even after blowing it off a few times. I now need to mix up some primer, and the primer we're going to be using is the exact same stuff that I've been using over the whole car. And that is this 4:1 highball primer from Vauxhall. Now this gets sprayed through a proper spray gun, so you get the best finish as possible and as much of the product on the car as well. Because with your aerosol primers and stuff, they're really thin as well, and they're okay for doing wee bits, but for doing proper bodywork and, you know, bare metal and bare plastic and stuff, you want a nice highball primer on there. So that's what we're going to be mixing up. This is the hardener we'll be using as well. This is fast hardener from Vauxhall. This goes hand in hand with this stuff, and it actually goes off really quick, especially with spraying outside. It really helps with it going off fast, so it's ideal. So primer into the gun. It is now time to get some primer onto these bumpers. So yes, it's now the moment of truth, actually getting the primer onto the panels. Now I've already sprayed the engine bay and rear quarter in primer out in my back garden, so we should hopefully be fine with the bumpers as well. Walking you through what I'm doing with the first coat on the front bumper. I'm making sure to go over the bumper pretty lightly because we don't want to be going too heavy with the first coat. We just want this one as a sort of gripper coat for the second coat. And just after laying down the first coat, I noticed this, a bit of reaction happening on the front bumper. This is obviously my fault, I've just not sanded it down enough or not cleaned it enough. But we can always fix this in the near future. And I actually ended up having enough primer left over to get a couple coats onto this front wing. I'd repaired this a couple of weeks ago and finally I could get some primer on it. So it's now a few hours since I'd primed the wing and the two bumpers. They look great, they're touch dry now, and we managed to get a couple of coats on each, which is plenty. Now we did have a slight bit of reaction on the front bumper, as you can see there in the wee bits of the grooves. So we'll rectify that once it's fully dried out. That's a fancy word, rectify. So aye, I'm pretty happy how they've came out. Really happy in fact, because that's a massive job out of the way. They were such a faff to sand down as well, because they were all flaking off and stuff with the old aerosol paint that was on them. I've also put a wee repair on the bit that I was on about in the last week's video, and aye, it was last week's vlog, so if you did watch that, you'll know when we primed the arch, there was a wee bit of high spot there, so I'd hit that in, and I've put a wee bit of fill on it, so hopefully once I rub that down, that should all be gone. But aye, apart from that, that does bring us to the end of this week's video. We're almost there with the other side. Come round. I think maybe a day or two more, the welding should be finished on the Nova, and then I can get on with repairing that and then priming this side, and then it's pretty much ready for paint. So you've got that to look forward to coming up in the next week or so. So thank you all very much for watching this video. Please like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new or you're watching my videos and you're not subscribed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.